Welcome to Momentum for Change, Voices of the Missouri Movement. This is a monthly podcast produced by your coalition, and I am your host, Nora Mosby, a member services specialist at the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. We hope you enjoy this conversation coming to you from Voices of the Missouri Movement. Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of season 3 of Momentum for Change. This is your host, Nora Mosby, and Momentum for Change is a podcast brought to you by the Missouri Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence to lift up voices of the Missouri movement. As many of our listeners are well aware, 2024 is going to be a big election year. And in preparation, MOCADSV would like to use our time today to discuss civic engagement and what opportunities exist to support survivors' voting rights and to engage our communities in positive change. I am really looking forward to our episode today. I am joined by two of my wonderful coworkers, Sammie Jurado, who is a partnership development specialist, and Matthew Huffman, our chief public affairs officer. Sammie and Matthew, this is an issue that you are both very passionate about and knowledgeable on. So I'm very happy to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
As we're getting started, would you all like to introduce yourselves and let our listeners know what you do at the Coalition, specifically as it relates to public policy?
Sure. Thanks, Nora. So, like you mentioned, I am the Chief Public Affairs Officer at the Coalition. And so in that capacity, I manage our public affairs department, and it's our team that really takes lead on our state and federal public policy efforts. Something that I also do is work with our public policy committee, coordinating their monthly meetings and then our summer strategic planning retreat as well.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Sammie,
Yeah, I'm Sammie Jurado. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a partnership development coordinator here at the Coalition. And my involvement with our public policy work is I kind of coordinate our public policy exchange, which is a convening of the Domestic and Sexual Violence Coalition public policy members of all of the states that border Missouri. And we get together and we chat about legislation and laws that will affect survivors and the work that we do. And it's a really cool collaboration to be a part of. And that's kind of where I have the most involvement in our public policy work.
Yeah. So in addition to your passion for civic engagement, you all are both very experienced and passionate about supporting survivors of domestic and sexual violence. And a couple of years ago, MOCADSV launched a voting rights campaign with the tagline, quote, "Voting rights are survivor rights." And I just love this tagline for so many reasons. And I thought it really aligned with a lot of our values around empowerment and supporting survivors. And so can you talk about voting rights are survivors' rights and what that means to you?
Sure. I'll kind of kick us off with that since I helped work on that back in 2022, a little before Sammie joined us on staff. But also, Sammie, definitely want you to weigh in with your thoughts on this too. So when we worked on this back in 2022, it was really after the state legislature had passed some new voting laws that were in effect. And we also felt really strongly that, voters' rights affect anyone over the age of 18. And we also know that civic engagement can help to build stronger, more connected, safer, and healthier communities. So we felt like it was really important to be able to educate Missourians as a whole about these new laws, but also to really spread the message that survivors of domestic and sexual violence can feel empowered by using their voice at the ballot box. We know that power and control are really at the root of violence. And so encouraging survivors to use their voice at the ballot box is a really specific way of helping them regain their power.
Absolutely. So supporting survivors' voting rights is a way of empowering survivors, but also a way of preventing violence, which you've always been a huge champion for, Matthew.
Absolutely.
Sammie, would you like to speak to voting rights or survivors' rights?
Yeah, I mean, I really do love this kind of tagline because it's true. And um, as somebody who loves prevention and all things prevention, it also really speaks to how that can prevent it because survivors are part of the community that they live in. They are not only survivors. They work in the places, they go to school, they send their kids to places. So they are part of that community. And being a survivor, like you still have rights as a voter. And so it just kind of makes it really clear of like you are not just a survivor, you are still part of this community. And the more engaged you are in your community, the safer it is. And it's also just a way to engage the system that we're trying to change from a prevention lens. You know, we have amazing advocates who have all of this training. Our training can be developed as well. We can have all of the resources or know all of the resources that are accessible to our survivors, whether those resources are limited or not. But if we're not engaging the system that's making those things available, then we can't make sustainable change. We can't get more resources. We can't secure funding that's going to last forever, right? If we are engaged in that system and use that voice that survivors have, that perspective of this is what happened to me. Yes, these advocates are great. Yes, these resources are amazing. We need to keep them. We need access to them. We need to expand this. We need the system to support those things. And that's a really cool way of understanding how, like, if we get folks engaged and utilizing their right to vote, then we really can make a change in those systems, and we can change those laws, which will change people's lives.
Yeah, you bring up so many important points here, Sammie, but one of the first things that's coming to mind that I hadn't really thought of before is how important volunteering, activism, and civic engagement can be in survivors' healing. And so as advocates, our role in connecting survivors with civil rights can be an important part of their healing process. And that's what we're all here for. So.
Yeah, for sure.
So there is a lot to talk about when it comes to the intersection of civic engagement and advocacy. But it's 2024, and so I wanted to start off with an issue that has a lot of urgency to it, and that is elections. We're in the middle of some pretty interesting presidential elections and local elections. There's a lot that's going to be happening at the polls. And so I know that our role at the coalition is to support our members. And so I was wondering if you could share any insights or thoughts, even tips about how domestic and sexual violence advocacy programs can best engage with elected officials during campaign season.
Yeah, Nora, that's such a great question. And I think a really important one that we try to bring up with members every time there's an election. And so it is absolutely okay and great for advocates to be working with elected officials and advocating with elected officials. But I will say that it is best to avoid engaging with candidates or campaign staff. And I say that because if you are engaging in any way with a candidate for office or their campaign staff, you have to be really careful that it doesn't veer into electioneering. So folks who work at 501c3 nonprofits cannot endorse anyone for office or oppose anyone for office for that matter either. And that's actually true for any candidate running for office, regardless of if they are tied to a political party. So that even includes city council, school board, county sheriff. If you're running for office, then advocates and agencies really need to be cautious about engaging with those candidates. If a candidate for office does reach out to an agency and talk about, this is an issue that's really important for me. If I'm able to win my election, here's how I'd like to be able to help you out. It's best for that agency to politely thank them for reaching out, but say that they can't really engage with campaign staff because they have to remain nonpartisan. And also, if a candidate does reach out wanting to engage, an agency needs to make sure that they make any information that they give to that candidate available to anyone else running for that office too. Again, just to show that they are being completely impartial during that election. That being said, once the election is over and there is an official winner for that office, that's a great opportunity then to reach out and say, you know what, it would be great for you to be able to come and visit our agency, learn more about us and the resources that we provide in your district and to survivors in our community. So that's a very long way of saying it's great to engage with our elected officials once they've been elected. During the campaign season, though, we need to be really cautious about who we're engaging with.
That makes a lot of sense. One question that comes up here at the coalition quite a bit within our own staff is how our staff can either volunteer or participate in kind of a campaign or supporting an elected official on their own free time when they're not at work. Do you want to speak to that at all, Matthew?
Yeah, of course. So, I think that it is absolutely great for our coworkers, for folks who work at member agencies to be civically engaged. So really the only sort of advice that we offer is making it really clear that your involvement in any activities with a candidate or a campaign is on your time as an engaged citizen of Missouri. And also just being really cautious to put, disclaimers on any of your social media accounts if you are sharing political information on there, that it is your own opinion and not the opinion of the agency. And then other things, just being mindful of, like, not wearing a candidate or any sort of political affiliation t-shirt to work or to a work event. And so just kind of being really cautious about when you have on your official work cap, and then whenever you have on your engaged citizen who wants to be involved in political activity.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were talking about that, I mean, I think that's such an important point. But I was remembering a time as an advocate that I had a candidate's bumper sticker on my car and I thought nothing of it. And then I had a survivor that I was working with who was like, "Oh, you're going to vote for that person?" and had wanted to talk about it. And it, I don't know if it was the best thing for my advocacy relationship that was, needed to be kind of neutral and not very politically charged. So just another kind of thing to think about that does come up in our work as advocates. Anything else you want to add to that, Sammie?
I would just say, like, kind of on the flip side of, like, you might have a bumper sticker or, like, don't wear a candidate's t-shirt, but also don't wear a work t-shirt while you're volunteering. Don't have your name tag on as a representative of the agency that you work for while you are volunteering or working at the polls or whatever it might be, or on your own personal time, just to make sure that you are doing everything that you need to be doing and, being an engaged citizen, which is all great. And we are always encouraging that. But just making sure that you're really mindful of what you are representing when you are representing it.
Absolutely. Those
That's a
professional
great
boundaries are very important. So thanks for speaking to that, you too. Any other issues that you think advocacy organizations should be aware of during an major election year? Or does that pretty much cover it?
I think that pretty well covers it. And Sammie, I think you bring up such a good point of, on the reverse side of things, when you are engaging in any sort of campaign activity, being cautious that you're not wearing any work gear or name tag. But one other thing I will add is we will have a few ballot initiatives likely this year as well that we'll be voting on. And I just wanted to speak to that briefly because it is actually okay for 501c3 nonprofits to endorse a ballot measure. Doing that is considered lobbying, but because ballot measures are not connected to a political party or affiliation, they're more issue-based. And so nonprofits can support issue-based initiatives. And there's some really great information from Alliance for Justice if folks want to know more about what some of those kind of guidelines and guardrails are around that. But I do think it's really important for folks to know the difference between supporting or endorsing a ballot initiative and that you can do that versus the limitations that we have around political candidates and engaging with them.
That's such a great point. And we will share the link to Alliance for Justice in the show notes of this episode. Thanks for sharing that resource, Matthew. So civic engagement can, as you all talked a little bit about briefly before, be a really important part of our advocacy services. So can you share any other thoughts you have about the connection between empowerment, advocacy services, and civic engagement, specifically how advocates can support survivors in voting?
Yeah. I really do believe that empowered, educated voters can change, make so much change. There's such an impact that you can have if you are empowered to use your voice and you're educated on how and when the issues that you feel strongly about can impact the community that you live in, work in, play in. And so I think it's really, really important just in general as an advocate or individually to support yourself and your coworkers, other advocates, to encourage them to be empowered, educated voters, but also survivors. And different ways that you can do that is you can help survivors access information on voter registration. So giving them the link to the Secretary of State's website to check their voter registration or to show them where they can get registered. You can also take them to the polls. You know, if survivors need assistance with transportation, as we know, a lot of the times transportation can be difficult in certain areas or certain places, depending on the situation. But you can help survivors access those polls or get them to places so they can exercise their right to vote. And you can also help them get access to IDs. I mean, I know that a lot of advocates already do that, and they don't necessarily think of it as a way to support voter rights. But helping them get access to the birth certificates and their IDs so they can vote when the time comes is really important. And it's something that you are also able to assist with.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that was coming to mind for me when you were talking about all these strategies is just how important it can be to give survivors that information about how to vote. When I was an advocate, I worked with a lot of immigrant survivors of violence. And oftentimes, as survivors would get their citizenship, I could provide information to them about how to register to vote. And let me tell you, it was so exciting to get to celebrate helping somebody register to vote for the first time. And this work of advocacy can be really challenging, can be really hard. And so we have to celebrate those successes because that's really what can sustain us for the long term. And oof, let me tell you, watching somebody get their first voter ID card in the mail is just, it fills your cup. It's such a victory.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And I think too, an important piece with this is like, especially with survivors, a lot of them are very transient, right? They're fleeing their homes or going into transitional housing or whatever it is. So your voter registration, they might be registered to vote, but where they land might be a different place. So just giving them information on like, here's how to check where you're registered to vote and how to update that if you need to. I think is also a really important piece that people often kind of put on the back burner, right? I think everybody would say that we recognize voter rights is really important. But when a survivor is in the middle of crisis, it's not the first thing that we think of. And so just as an advocate, keeping that in the back of your mind of like how helping someone get access to an ID really is helping them access their right to vote. It's an additional thing that you are helping them do, and kind of understanding how that's all connected, I think is really cool. When you kind of take that step back of like, we're not in this immediate crisis, but all of these things that I'm helping a survivor work through or navigate in that crisis is also helping them access their rights as a voter and other things too.
Beautifully said, Sammie. Anything else you would add to that, Matthew?
No, nope. I agree with you, Nora. Beautifully said.
Beautifully said. Well, I would just want to affirm to our members out there that, it is normal to be cautious and concerned when we are looking at the intersection of politics, civic engagement, and advocacy services. And so as these issues come up about how to connect with your community in ways that follow the law and funding requirements, please know that you can call the coalition, and the same goes for as you are working to support survivors around these issues. If you have any questions, give us a call, send us an email. We're always happy to help out with these issues. So I want to talk a little bit about community connectedness. As many of our listeners will know, April was Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and the theme for sexual assault awareness this month was building connected communities. We know that building connected communities is an evidence-based strategy for preventing domestic and sexual violence. The research is out there. It supports these. We're not just saying it. And so we know that when our community members are registered to vote and they participate in elections, they're more connected with each other and violence occurs less often. So we have in the past promoted an awareness campaign called #CivicHealth as identifying strategies for violence prevention in years past. So can you talk about these efforts and the connection between civic engagement and violence prevention?
Yeah, Nora, that's such a really great question too. And you're right, there's a lot of evidence from public health research to show us that whenever community members are civically engaged, whenever they feel like they are connected to each other, that we have safer, stronger, healthier communities. We've also seen that civic engagement and volunteerism has a lot of really positive benefits, not only for individuals, but in helping neighbors feel more connected to each other, in helping entire communities become more vibrant and to thrive. And so that was really at the heart of the #CivicHealth campaign. And it was really to promote this idea of civic engagement and community connectedness as a protective factor. That's something that can occur, regardless of if it's an election year or not. But again, it's a really specific way of giving folks an entry point of engagement with others in their community. And I think that was something that we always try and keep in mind with our prevention initiatives, is really keeping this idea of building connected communities and community connectedness as a really important protective factor against violence. It's something that we also made a point to really kind of have at the heart of our Engage program that we worked on with Missouri Partners in Prevention and the Department of Health and Senior Services. So that prevention program is really specific to college campuses, and recognizing that whenever students feel like they are more connected to each other, they're connected to their campus, they know that campus officials care about them and want to be connected with them, and that they are part of that larger surrounding community, then it causes people to care about each other more, to care about their community more, and to build up that connectedness that really helps to prevent violence from occurring. I could go on and on about that, but I just think it's such a really important and specific way that we can feel connected to each other and to our community.
Absolutely, it truly is. Sammie, I know that at the coalition, you lead a lot of our prevention efforts as well, and have talked a lot recently about community connectedness and the power of community connections to prevent violence. Anything you want to say about that in terms of civic engagement?
I mean, I think Matthew speaks really eloquently about how those two things kind of connect, but I do really just want to drive home that we say this all the time to survivors: your voice matters. We need to give people a voice, and being civically engaged is really being able to give people access to that voice, um, and encouraging them to use it. And I mean, we could probably talk for days about how access to voice can be limited or silenced and things like that. But when you do have access to that voice or can help survivors tap into that and encourage them to be empowered, educated voters, it's just a really cool thing to see when they're part of a community that they feel like they have a say in and they can use their voice and it's being listened to. And I think that's not just true for survivors, right? Like, we as individuals want to believe that we are living in a community that is listening to us and values our perspective and our opinions. And when you kind of have that tiered level, like Matthew was talking about, it really does make a difference of how connected you feel to the people around you, and how much safer that can make your community.
Absolutely. So the coalition has always been very committed to keeping our members informed of public policy developments. And so back in 2022, we did publish an informational handout about voting rights, specifically in response to some changes in voter registration law and voting laws in Missouri. Can you all talk about that publication and any highlights that you think would be important to share with our listeners?
Sure. So this is a short publication, one of our shorter publications. If you know anything about the coalition's materials, some of them can be very long, always good content, but this one is a one-pager front and back, and just kind of goes over some of the things we've already talked about today, about like how to help folks get access to their voter registration information, and then also how to get folks connected to getting their IDs, their non-driver's license, their driver's license, birth certificates. Last year, actually, law was passed that if you are a survivor of domestic violence, you can get one free birth certificate, which is huge and super exciting. Because we know a lot of the times that is a huge barrier for folks to be able to really do anything. But it's especially a barrier in getting registered to vote. You need to have an ID in order to vote. So knowing that you can help them get access to birth certificates, their IDs, it kind of walks you through different ways that you can help survivors access that. It's also a cool thing that you could maybe pass out to survivors. So they have the information if they don't necessarily want or need you to do it. They can have the information on how they can access that. Matthew, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that was a perfect description of it, Sammie. I would say for listeners and members, be on the lookout for those materials to be sent to you again. So in 2022, we mailed out the one-pager that Nora and Sammie referenced, but we also mailed posters out to members as well for you to be able to hang at your agency. And it had a QR code on there where you could scan the QR code and it would take you to the Secretary of State's website so that you could check your voter registration. We will be sending those back out to members again this year, so be on the lookout for those coming to your agency soon.
Right.
I do also want to mention, sorry, Nora, I just want to mention real quick that it does also have information about the Safe at Home program, which I think is a really valuable program that the state of Missouri has, to really protect survivors. And so the poster has information about the Safe at Home program and being a participant of that program. And I know that a lot of advocates are Safe at Home application assistants. And so it'll give you information about how to access an application assistant or kind of what that might look like if you are one. And I think that's just an important thing to highlight as well.
Yeah. So just kind of wrapping up what you all both said at the point of advocacy, if somebody is registered with a Safe at Home program or needs to keep their address confidential or doesn't have an ID or doesn't even have a birth certificate, that should not be a barrier to them being registered to vote. And as an advocate, you can connect them with those resources in order to enable them to vote in these upcoming elections. So thanks for sharing all that. And as Matthew said, we will be rolling out more materials as we get closer to election season to support our members in this work. So in addition to our work to engage survivors politically, we also do a lot to engage our members. And Matthew, you facilitate the Public Policy Committee at the Coalition, which is a committee of our board of directors that is made up of representatives of our member organizations. Can you talk about the role of the Public Policy Committee? They do a lot, I know. And kind of what their role is in providing information to local communities and advocating on behalf of legislative priorities.
Yeah, you are absolutely right, Nora. They do a lot. And I feel really lucky to get to work with the folks on our public policy committee. So like you mentioned, the committee is comprised of all of the folks who serve on our board of directors, so both community members and advocates for member agencies. But then we've also worked in the last couple of years to really make sure that we're creating leadership ladders for advocates for member agencies to join the Public Policy Committee and make sure that we have really strong representation from all of our regions in the state. We also know that many of the advocates who are serving on our Public Policy Committee are engaged locally in either their city boards or commissions, or civic organizations that are in their community as well. And I think that that's really important because we know that advocates are experts on the dynamics of their community, and they are very well aware of the needs of survivors and their families. And so I'm really grateful to get to work with those folks because they bring that expertise and they bring that engagement from their own community to the public policy work that we do on a state and national level. And I think that that's particularly important because we often talk about, with our public policy motto, we change laws, we change lives. It's advocates who are able to do that because we really want to make sure that our public policy work is centered on the needs of survivors and the needs of service providers. So the folks in our public policy committee, they are bringing, again, that advocacy, that expertise, that engagement, taking all of the knowledge of what they are doing at the local level and applying it to some of our broader public policy and systems change initiatives. So again, I'm so grateful to get to work with them because they bring so much passion and energy into our monthly meetings, into that retreat that we have in the summer. They really want to be able to think about how can we change laws? How can we change lives? But also something that was really great that came out of our strategic planning retreat last summer is that folks who serve on that committee are also really invested in creating those leadership opportunities to bring more advocates in and to get them engaged in our public policy work. So it's really great to be able to see just the energy and the excitement that they bring to the work.
Yes, I agree. And thank you to any of our Public Policy Committee members out there that are listening. We certainly appreciate how generously you give your time and share wisdom with the coalition and our members. So in addition to our work statewide, we have reached out recently in the last year, and we are working at the interstate level, so to connect with other state coalitions that are neighboring Missouri. And that's a project that you led, Sammie. So Sammie, can you talk to us about the value of engaging coalitions from other states?
Sure. I It was a really cool project, and I think it was just really like a light bulb moment for all of us. It came out from one of our members who, shout out to our members for like keeping a pulse on what is going on around them, who was like, "Hey, this law was passed, and it might affect the way that we do things. So maybe we should talk about it." And we're like, "Yeah, that's a great idea." So we kind of got together all of the sexual assault and DV coalitions in all of the states that border Missouri, just to kind of, again, continue that collaboration of what can we learn from each other? What information can we share that might help you and your advocates and survivors stay safe and start thriving and healing in all of those things? Because as we know, not every survivor stays in Missouri. Not every survivor started in Missouri. So knowing kind of what is going on around us really, really helps empower us and give us information on like, what is it that we can do to really support them holistically and not just in this really specific scenario or space. Yeah. And it's been really cool, to be honest. I mean, I walk away from every one of those meetings learning so much. And it's just awesome to kind of see too that, you know, everybody in that group is really excited to be there. I sent out one invitation and everyone's like, "This is a great idea. Absolutely. Let's participate." And so it wasn't something that anyone was hesitant to be a part of, which is really cool. And I think knowledge is power. Knowing more about what's going on around us really helps us shape our work and the lives of survivors who are going to be impacted by these things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's really cool. There'll be more information coming out about laws that are passed in our neighboring states later this fall, once all of the legislative sessions have ended and things like that. So more information to come. So stay tuned if you are interested in any of that information. But I do think it's a really important thing to just be connected to your communities, not just at the local or state level, but your regions and what's going on around you. It really makes a difference.
Absolutely. And you were able to synthesize a lot of kind of your findings from those discussions in a publication that is available on our website. Mm-hmm. And I think another thing that's really valuable from those discussions that will continue to be valuable in the future is that policymakers often replicate policies from other states here in Missouri. And so they'll steal ideas from each other. And so if we're informed about what's happening in other states, it can help us anticipate what's going to be happening here in Missouri.
For sure.
So Matthew, I warned our listeners that civic engagement is an issue you have long been passionate about. And you truly are. You have volunteered during election season at the polls as an election judge. And you've done that for many years in the past. So can you talk about why you chose to use your personal time to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the opportunity to serve as an election judge a few times, and I just really have loved the opportunity every time I've done it. At the coalition, we have what is referred to as a floating holiday in some of our paid time off buckets. And I use my floating holiday on election day to serve as an election judge. Because, you know, for me personally, I think that we should have election day as a national holiday and folks should be able to take that day off. Not to editorialize too much, but I do think it's important that we are able to easily access voting. And that's really part of why I loved being an election judge, is helping people access the vote. That's a big part of serving as an election judge, is helping people get to vote on the day of the election. There are a lot of folks who might have trouble seeing, and so an election judge is also there to help folks who might have visual impairments. That election judge is there to help explain the process of what is on the ballot. Obviously, you cannot tell people how to vote, but you can tell them what is on the ballot so they understand it when they are voting. And so I think that serving as an election judge is really an important matter of access and helping people access the ballot. Um, I've also found it really rewarding, though, because it's so encouraging to serve as an election judge and be there to help that first time voter, to see the excitement of a first time voter getting to show up to the polls. I also really loved seeing entire families that come in together. And so bringing in grandparents with them, bringing in kids who are like sitting on their mom's knee while they vote, but seeing whole families come in and vote together as a family activity was just really great. And like we've talked about several times in the podcast so far, that idea of community connectedness, and whenever folks feel really connected in their community, that's also something that I love, because serving as an election judge, many of the polling stations are schools or churches or places that are already open to the public and really encourage community connectedness there. And I think that that's another really important thing, is that we are using our community spaces to bring people together. And so it makes for a very long day, but a very rewarding day. So I would absolutely encourage other folks who haven't had the opportunity to be an election judge in their community to not be intimidated by it, because it's such a rewarding experience.
Yeah, as you were talking about what what your duties were as a election judge, it really sounds like you're helping the public navigate the election process in much of the same way that advocates help survivors navigate systems. I just see a lot of parallels there, and I'm not surprised that you found it very rewarding, because I know you're a true advocate at heart. So thanks for
Uh,
taking time to talk about that.
Of course, I completely agree with you, Nora. I see so many parallels and direct connections there. So yeah, I think it's just a really important, it's an important thing for us to do.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, but I wanted to be sure to ask you all, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about related to civic engagement and supporting survivors, or supporting our members today?
Yeah, I think one thing that I want to mention is that um, getting younger voters engaged is often something that folks kind of, I don't know, pass over or don't necessarily realize how impactful that can be. But in this, we have access to vote when you're 18, and young folks, younger generations have a lot to say. They also have a lot of really important insight that, sometimes we forget, that what they're experiencing in their community, they are in it. They observe a lot of things. They have a lot of knowledge that we often don't recognize, and finding ways to keep younger voters engaged and encouraged to, again, use their voice and be empowered to access that right to vote. It's a really cool thing. Like, the more folks that do vote, the more information that they have, the more changes we can make, the more impact we have. And so I just really encourage folks to not forget about those younger voters that really are knowledgeable and have a lot of really important things and perspectives, and really being able to encourage them to also access their right, I think is really important thing to not forget about.
I agree. It's such an important point, Sammie. Anything you
Yep.
also wanted to be sure to speak to, Matthew?
No, I think that that was very well said, Sammie. I want to echo and lift up everything that you just said there.
Yes, please. So in closing, I just wanted to ask you all, is there anything in particular that you're looking forward to, either professionally in your role at the coalition or in your personal life? Is there anything you're looking forward to with the upcoming election season?
That's a
I'm
good question.
excited.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited about being able to send the Voters' Rights Are Survivors' Rights campaign materials back out to members. And then, yeah, personally, looking forward to hopefully serving as an election judge again.
That's great.
I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing how communities are going to come together, how engaged folks are going to really be in this election season, but also just kind of moving forward. I'm also really excited to see kind of what laws are being passed in our state and other states, just not specifically election related, but just systems related in general. I think it really does. It just makes things a lot more clear when you know kind of what boundaries and systems you're working in and how we can make those changes, right? And so I'm just really excited to see kind of what comes of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I think that's just kind of where I'm at, of like, I just want to see where we land. And kind of what happens and how we can use that information to continue moving this work forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing your thoughts about civic engagement. I just really learned a lot from you both and appreciate you taking time to be here. So thanks for that. And then I want to thank you listeners for also tuning in and listening to us chat about civic engagement. Please do stay in touch as questions come up around these issues. Get in touch with us here at the Coalition. You can see that we're always happy to talk about it. So thanks again for tuning in all, and we look forward to seeing you next month in June. Thank you for joining us. This has been a recorded conversation now available in both video and podcast formats. A video recording of this episode is available on the MOCADSV YouTube channel under the Momentum for Change playlist. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to receive new episodes in your YouTube feed. You can also find all of our Momentum for Change episodes available to stream on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. Momentum for Change is a podcast produced by MOCADSV with post-production support provided by Tim Stillings and promotion by Adrian Maddox. Again, I am your host, Nora Mosby, and we appreciate you joining us for this episode. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you next month.